don't give us one more thing to do. Don't tell me to change. I am surviving. And we tell ourselves the lie that this is working for me right now. Don't mess with it. When it's clearly not.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator. And now your host, Tyler Comeau.
Hi, alchemists, and welcome back to another episode of Elemental Educator. I'm your host, Tyler, and if you're joining us for the first time, thank you so very much for tuning in, and welcome to a place where we redefine leadership and challenge the status quo. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Elemental Educator on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast from, and check out our website, elementaleducator.com. Get ready to let the alchemy of education ignite your passion for learning. Today, we're joined by Andrea Perry, who is an experienced K-12 classroom teacher. She holds a Master's of Education in Curriculum and Instruction and is also certified as a life, health, and wellness coach. Her passion is supporting stressed teachers to overcome burnout, increase their overall health and well-being, and rekindle their passion and joy. Andrea, welcome to the Elemental Educator Podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I want to just jump right in and learn, how did you get to where you are now, Andrea?
Yeah, so I actually was a K through 12 teacher for 12 years. I taught everything from Spanish language to 5-year-olds all the way up to Spanish in high school. Also taught a lot of English at the secondary level. But when I was on maternity leave, actually, my school post-COVID had a lot of financial issues, had some budget cuts, and my teaching position was cut. But I wasn't quite ready to be done with education, teaching, supporting teachers yet. And so it just kind of coincided with being a mom and realizing that going back into the classroom with the cost of childcare wasn't something that would fit for us. And as I was brainstorming, like, how can I continue in education? How can I keep supporting teachers that I have this passion for? It just lined up perfectly with getting a coaching certification. Got certified as a life coach, and it just didn't seem to cover enough of what I wanted to help teachers with in this crisis that we have right now, not just in the United States, but in different parts of the world, of burnout. So I continued on with my health and wellness coaching certification, and I've just found that along with my teaching experience has been like the perfect combination to support teachers in this season of my life and continue being part of the world of education and through teachers supporting students.
So before you got into that K-12 teaching experience, what led you to wanting to jump into the realm of teaching?
Yeah, good question. So unlike many teachers who say like they felt this calling from an early age, I didn't so much. I enjoyed school. I was kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to be something medical, maybe a veterinarian. But it was actually career tests that I took that was really showing that I had a strong aptitude for language, for writing, and teaching service to others. So I was like, well, let's give this a try. And it was when I got to college and I took my first education class. The very first year we needed to be in classrooms doing clinical, basically, experience in the classroom. And I just fell in love with teaching and with kids. And from there, it was just a no-brainer for me.
It's interesting because everybody, when I ask that question, what led you into education, it's always one of two ends. It's always, I grew up playing teacher as a kid, or not at all, wasn't on my mind. There's no gray area. Whereas I hummed and hawed over it and then decided to try it out. So it's always nice to hear those stories. Similar to me, I wasn't thinking of becoming a teacher growing up either. And here we are in the education world. It segues so nice to what you're doing now, because it's rooted in the same type of values. And
Yes.
we'll unpack that here, because Earth represents those core values and really rooting yourself in those beliefs. So Andrea, how do you help teachers reconnect with their core values?
Yeah, great question. Because we don't often think about our values. We figure at this point of our life as adults, they're set. We know what we value. And so we just kind of operate on autopilot. But our values actually do change over time and in each season of life. And burnout usually comes when we're living our life out of alignment with those values. So this is like one of the first things I focus on with clients. Just creating space, first of all, for clients to question, like, what are my values in this season of life? Have they changed since I started teaching 10 years ago, 5 years ago? And then I also provide some tools to help them start evaluating what their values are right now in this season of their life. And it's a resource that I love to share to all the listeners as well. It's a downloadable, very quick 2-page workbook, kind of helping you kind of figure out like what are my core values, because sometimes we say core values, well, what's even in that? So it has a really nice list. You can kind of rate them and figure out what are your core values right now, so that then they can start aligning their life in the areas that they see are misaligned, and that will help start the shift towards overcoming burnout and finding maybe their passion again, or being reminded of it.
So what core values are you rooted in right now?
Right now, it's a great question. My core values have definitely changed since I started teaching, and a lot of that has revolved around family. So I taught in private school many, many years, and there was a very easy blurring of lines of work-life balance there, especially as a young single teacher. But as I've moved on in my profession and grown in my life, met and married my husband, and now we have a little baby girl, my values as a young single teacher who could just pour all of my time, my heart, my soul, into my students, take the extra coaching, go, weekend trips, sponsors, all the kind of stuff. Those values that were so important to me at the beginning have shifted to, I have a husband, I have a little girl at home. These are my values. This is very important too. And I want to make sure they're prioritized as a high value. And those weren't part of my life in the early season of it. So just seeing a shift, it doesn't mean that I value less, the importance of my students and the work that I do in the classroom. But there's a shift in mindset of, I need to make sure that there's space made for those core values. Because if I'm spending too much time at work or bringing work home and it's cutting into my core value of relationship with family, I'm going to feel pretty burnt out pretty quickly. So that's kind of been a huge one for me and a shift in my current core values.
So I look at the value of family a little differently here. And I want to pick your brain on it.
Sure.
Not that I don't value my family, I should say that. But my core value is love. And because when I think of it, I have to find out what my core value truly is. I have to strip everything that is external in my life away. If I removed my family, I remove going to the gym, I remove all of the externals, what do I stand for? And one thing is love for myself, love to my family. And that's why they've become an emphasis and a priority.
Right.
Love for my kids. That's why I love teaching. Right. So could you share maybe the difference between why you're stating family over the core value of love?
Yeah, definitely. Good question, because you're absolutely right. It does stem from love. And if we broke it down like that, I would say I share that with you as well. I think it's difficult for many of us to go from the very concrete of family to the more vague idea of emotions. Like I value love, because then we need to break that down further. They're like, okay, well, what does that look like in action? And so it's just a way to kind of make those emotions and those core values, like you were talking about, like love, more tangible, because you will definitely see that thread between all of your values. Love of yourself.
Yeah, the idea of simplicity, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Love of showing yourself love, by making healthy choices, but that might show up as someone saying, I prioritize my health. But they always see that underlying layer of, this is actually self-love. And this is love to others by taking care of myself, or whatever it might be. But you're absolutely right. You'll find a common thread.
Yeah. Thanks for taking it there with me. And with that, what you've done by saying family and what you do with people you work with is you simplify the process into tangible things that they can instantly relate to, right? We just talked about love being that big, broad category.
Correct.
So as someone who helps teachers create sustainable careers, what core principles do you emphasize to ensure that they can maintain that, healthy work-life balance and a professional demand that is just excruciatingly exhausting?
Yes, that one's it's tough, because it's a journey. It's ongoing. We never quite reach that destination as we continue to change as humans, and our environments around us change. But I would just definitely say, number one, know your core values well. Like when you know yourself well, is when you're going to feel confident in doing all of the other things. For example, the next one would be setting healthy boundaries. What that looks like, no one can dictate to you. Like only you can know, right?
You say that so much nicer than me, by the way. I call it establishing your non-negotiables.
And you know what? It's the same idea, right? Because you really are. You're deciding what is worth your yes. And I like to put it that way too, because we think setting boundaries is always saying no to something. But so often as teachers, we have a really hard time saying no to things, especially when it revolves around our students.
Yes.
And so when you think about, okay, I know my core values, so I need to make sure that I set boundaries that say yes to my core values. So if you're saying no to sponsoring that extra club, what are you actually saying yes to? Are you saying yes to family time, your physical health, your mental health in this season of life, whatever it might be? And sometimes that makes it easier for those of us who struggle saying the no, kind of flipping it to the more positive, like, well, I'm actually saying yes to something else.
Absolutely.
And with that, just giving yourself grace. And I think this is hard for many of us. We are so good at guilting ourselves when we do set a boundary because we worry that it's going to hurt this person, or we won't be able to serve our students as well, or this time might take away from this. So just practicing a lot of grace with ourselves, and in that getting support. Because it's one thing to be in your own mind telling yourself it's okay, you don't need to feel guilty, this is good. But having that positive support, whether from a colleague or a supportive administrator, a partner, whatever that might be, that can be a support for you as you're trying to stay true to those core principles and help you kind of stay accountable to yourself.
Absolutely. And saying no is hard. And
Yes.
the kind of workaround that I always tell people to start with is just say not right now. Right? Not right now.
Mm-hmm.
You might believe in what you want to do. That club might sound really cool. Taking on that extracurricular might be something that you love doing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say no. Say not right now.
Yeah.
Not right now, because you might come back to it later. Because like you said, your values can shift, your time can shift, your experiences can shift. Next thing you know, you might find yourself wanting to say yes.
Right.
When you say no, you can sometimes close that door that you want to keep a little bit open.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And I always, I help my clients kind of go through a script if they're very having difficulty with saying no, like how to say no, kind of leave that door open and just be really gracious about, like, thank you for thinking of me, because it's wonderful actually to be thought of and be like, you would be great in this position. You would do really well at this. And it makes it even harder for us to say no when we can recognize, like, thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate that you thought of me for this role. But like you said, not right now. You can maybe revisit it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And acknowledging that, I understand me saying no is not what you want to hear, right?
Yeah.
They want to hear yes, they want to hear that. And sometimes it's warranted to say no. But with that, in your experience, how do you guide teachers to rediscover, we're just talking about saying no, that burnout, digging into those core values. How do they rediscover their joy and fulfillment both inside and outside the classroom?
Yeah, that's a big one. So it's something that through my experience, I've navigated in a messy sort of way, figuring that out on my own. So now I've actually created a signature program that helps support teachers in really tangible steps, practical, because as teachers, we don't want to waste time on theory. We just give me something to do right now that's going to make an immediate change for the positive in my classroom, right? Like, don't make me sit through this long thing that's all theoretical. I want to know, give me a tool right now that I can use. So we go week by week through very specific steps you can take and we just start with identifying the root cause of burnout, because it's different for every person, right? And it's usually a combination of a few factors. But my experience with burnout might be completely different from somebody else who has a different life situation. And then we do talk about core values and strategies for how to be successful making change, because that's a huge thing that I work on as a coach. Because just as humans, right, making change is difficult. And making change when we're already exhausted and overwhelmed and burned out is tough. So strategies that make implementing changes stick, to make them easy, to make them achievable. And we work through a lot of mindset blocks. Because boy, we as teachers have a lot, well, as humans, we have a lot of things that we tell ourselves that are not necessarily true that keeps us stuck in this cycle of burnout from, misplaced beliefs about how something works or about our own value, different things like that. So we work through mindset blocks. It's a huge part of the process, because if we still believe the same things that are not true, we can't move forward.
So I want to ask here, and I'm going to kind of challenge the status quo around burnout here.
Yeah.
Now, we talk about burnout and wanting to work with the individual teacher, and this is how you can overcome your burnout. But I actually look at burnout as more of a system problem. And burnout and a lack of retention of staff, that's usually related to, and not just in education sectors, but in all organizations and sectors, you don't have collective efficacy, you don't have alignment, and their personal values there are not aligned with the values of your company, or at least the values that you're pushing out and actioning. So could you compare the difference between, internal burnout versus what I would call external burnout, which is more from the system?
Yeah, 100%. Because you're right. There's a lot of stuff out there that contributes to burnout, and focusing here on education, I know that there have been places that I have been where it was not setting teachers up for success in this area. Being asked a lot, not feeling like you can say no, lots of guilt, top down of you need to do this. So I definitely understand that external burnout and how that can be really unhealthy, for sure. For sure. And
this is really important, right? In those situations, we tell kids all the time, if something's not working, advocate for yourself and talk about it and stand up for yourself.
Yes.
And yet here we are in situations saying, if you don't like how things are going, find something good to cling on to and it'll make you feel great. Advocate for yourself. Have that conversation with your leadership team. Let them know that there's discomfort, because you're not going to grow if you're not having that difficult conversation.
Correct. 100%. And I definitely don't advocate for someone staying within a toxic work environment. I have been there, and I did not realize I was there because I was a very young teacher, and it took a change to a different school environment that really showed me that. If we think about relationships, we're not saying stay in an abusive relationship. We're not saying stay in a toxic environment where you're mistreated. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to be really clear, because there are systemic issues, but then there's also very toxic work environments that can definitely lead to burnout, and that it's okay to advocate for yourself, to make a change if you need to. Unfortunately, I think sometimes we make a change out of the profession. Instead of, this school environment isn't healthy, I've tried advocating and change isn't happening. So I do need to move locations, but maybe not professions, And so you said, it's not just like find your happy place and just cling on to that and just wrap everything else in a shiny little bubble, because that just invalidates our experience so much. But I will say that I follow another coach, and I think I'll talk about her a little bit later on too, Jen Rafferty, and she also supports teachers really well. And she says systemic change begins with the individual. Because really, sometimes I think it's very easy for us as educators to sit in a room with other educators and complain about all the system things that we may not be able to change. Yes, we can advocate for ourselves, and we should be advocating for ourselves, starting healthy conversations, being the change. But what we really have control over, and I think where some of the burnout comes from feeling like we're out of control, is saying the whole problem is out here and I'm a victim of it. And instead of saying, this system, there's a lot to work on. There's a lot of areas for improvement. And I think we're seeing some improvement in conversations we're having now in the education world and in school systems as well. But to say, instead of just focusing on that, what can I do here in my classroom, in my home, in my person today to be the change, to make the change? And maybe it's as simple as finding a way to find joy in the work that you once had, and other people wondering how you're like that in this environment, and spreading that. Or how does that person get to leave, at contract hours in 30 minutes after, and I'm still here for 2 hours? They might have something I want. So systemic change really does start with the individual, but it's not to discount that there are bigger issues, for sure.
Oh, for sure. And advocating is so important, because it brings awareness. And if you advocate enough, you bring consistency and frequency to the conversation, and then people start to take it a bit more seriously because they hear the legitimacy behind it.
Yes.
Now, what you're talking about too is establishing ownership of what you can control,
Yes.
right? And recognizing that you are not just a victim in this situation, taking the ownership of, okay, this might suck. What can I control? What can I take ownership over? What can I be accountable for? And make it the best thing you can possibly make it. Now,
Yeah.
this whole conversation, it's so, I'm very passionate about it, by the way, and it's
This is
so
great.
relevant, and it's so important. And, correct me if I'm wrong, the United States, they just declared, right, that teacher burnout and teacher retention is actually a crisis now in the States. It got moved up to crisis level.
Correct.
Which is crazy status, right? And that's huge. So they're saying this is a problem, right? It's a huge problem. That means we face a lot of the air element, which is the adversity that comes our way with it. And I'm sure this is going to go where I'm thinking it'll go, but I'll see if we take it there.
Okay.
And Andrea, can you share some of the most common challenges you've seen teachers face as they deal with burnout and how you guide them to overcome these obstacles?
Sure, definitely. Yeah, there are many, many challenges. And one is that locus of external, like I don't have control. I'm a victim. And so why try? Like I'm just stuck, and that's not a good feeling. But when there are teachers who want to actually address it, and who feel ready to address it, there comes a lot of guilt with burnout. For example, I hear teachers say that they feel like they're a bad teacher for experiencing burnout, or they're a bad person. Like it's my fault that I'm burned out because I haven't set healthy boundaries, or because, it's my fault that I'm burned out because I'm just not doing my best. So I'm still struggling. And that's completely untrue. But it's something that I hear from teachers. They feel this guilt and then they don't want to address it at all. Or they just think there's no way out of burnout. So I'm just going to leave the profession entirely because then it will be better, which isn't necessarily the answer either. Because you can burn out in any profession, of course. Or, they hear, okay, well, I need a better work-life balance, but I don't see how that's actually practically going to work. I can barely keep up with all the students, all my responsibilities, being as good a teacher as I need to be if I give less time to my work and a little bit more time outside of work to myself. This myth of if I just work harder, if I just work longer, I'll feel more prepared and things will get better and my students will perform better. So these are beliefs that might resonate with many teachers, because I know that these are some that I felt in the past. And so I work with clients to challenge those beliefs, because that's what they are. A belief is just something that we believe, but it's not fact. And sometimes we tell ourselves things that are not true. So we kind of figure out like a reality check. Like, well, let's try this. Let's test it out to see if it's true. Like if you actually went home 1 hour earlier than you normally do, let's try this for a week. What difference did you notice? Are your students struggling? Are they not meeting the standards? Are you feeling frantic? Are you less prepared? In general, no. Usually it's like, well, I used my time wisely. And I planned my instruction accordingly. And we did some informal assessments. And I came feeling more refreshed because I had time for exercise or to cook a healthy meal or whatever it is. But sometimes it really takes experiencing that and testing something out to really feel like I can do that. I can overcome this challenge, this mind block, and really
Absolutely.
make a difference.
And it's about optimizing your time. And, it's something as simple as when you have unassigned time or a prep, or I'm not sure what they might call it anywhere else across the world. Put your phone in a different room and work.
Yes.
And see how much you get done. Because I guarantee you, if you're on a prep right now, listening to this or on your way to work, think about your last prep. How many times did you check it? And that's going to eat away at the minutes that you're putting to on task time. That's eating away at the time that you could be leaving a little bit earlier after your school day or arriving a little bit later before that bell starts, because you've done it during the time you were given to do it, right? You think about teacher directed days and professional development days, putting meaning to those and actually doing the work as intensely with the high expectations for yourself, for love for yourself.
Yes.
So that you don't have to be staying an extra 2 hours when it's done to catch up on it because you spent 2 hours during your day having conversations.
Yes.
Right now.
Exactly.
And that's where the guilt can come in.
Mm-hmm.
And, burnout can actually tiptoe the opposite end too, with perfectionism and
Mm-hmm.
wanting to do everything the exact right way to a T. Well, I had Dr. Jody Carrington on here and she says it best. You're not that great. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw up all of the time. That's what makes you a human.
Yes.
You will never reach perfectionism. And you might plan the absolute perfect lesson and shit's going to hit the fan.
Yes.
And you can't control it, right?
Yes.
So with that though, and those two spectrums of perfectionism to guilt, how do you help teachers navigate these feelings and move toward that healthier mindset that allows for that self-compassion and growth?
Definitely. It's so funny because there are probably many perfectionists out there that do not think they're perfectionists. And these are usually the procrastinators because they have to wait until they can do it perfectly to do it or not do it at all. So you might be a perfectionist without knowing it, but it really, exactly right. You set yourself up for a failure because being perfect is not a human reality. And as teachers, I don't think any of us expect it from our students. We're really good at practicing grace and help growth mindset and all that, but we're not great at doing it for ourselves. And it gets really discouraging because we feel like we can never get ahead. And we really do work in a profession where our job really can never be done. If you think about it, you don't clock out. You don't just, there's always something you can be doing. And so
people are always making babies, right? Is that what we're getting at?
We always have to be supervising. A lesson could always be changed. Our bulletin board could look cooler, whatever it might be. But we need to figure out as perfectionists and as teachers, what is well done. And I'm not saying, you have high standards for yourself, but I don't know of any teacher that I've ever met or worked with who set the bar lower and still did not set a high bar. I never heard this since, right? Because we have our expectations so high that if we just lower a little bit, we're still getting our students right where they need to be, without harming them. And then, like you said, we were really good at guilting ourselves. We think we should be 100% all the time, doing all the same things, saying yes to everything. If we say no, we're a bad teacher. And so I really work with my clients to challenge those questions and those thoughts and to really define, what is realistic? We keep going back to that. What is realistic? What can you realistically accomplish during a day, a week? How do you give yourself grace? What does that look like? And a lot of the questioning that I do is informed by cognitive behavioral therapy, finding that irrational thought that we hold to be true and then questioning it and bringing it logically into reality. Because we do set ourselves up for failure and beat ourselves up. And how discouraging is it to go into a place where we never feel successful and we don't allow ourselves to make the mistakes and give ourselves the grace. And this goes a little bit back to your other point, but I heard somewhere it said, there's no award for being the last car in the parking lot. There's not. But so often we as teachers, we look around and they're always here. They're so dedicated. And that's the message we're sending our students as well. As a yearbook advisor at 2 separate schools, whenever we come across the question of who are we dedicating the yearbook to? Every single time, the students on their own come up with so-and-so, this teacher, they're always here. I've driven by the school at midnight and I've seen them. And we have to have this very, hopefully healthy discussion of, well, let's hold on. How are we measuring success or dedication? Because we're being examples to our students as well. And we need to ask ourselves that question. How are we measuring ourselves and our success? Is it by being the last car in the parking lot? By putting in the hours, comparing to each other, comparing to this perfectionistic ideal that we can never achieve? What is it? And then be very concrete. What is good enough? What can you be satisfied with that's in your control?
Yep. And some of the best leaders that I know with intention, they have tons of work where they could stay at a building until 6 o'clock at night doing their admin work. They choose to leave a lot earlier to set an example that it's okay to leave.
Yes.
And they go home and they work at home on their computer and they still get it done, but they're setting that physical example for the teachers, at least, that it is okay for you to leave right now.
That's
right?
huge.
I'm leaving. I'm going to model leaving, and it's huge. Now, Andrea, I have to ask, because you did start yourself as a teacher, and then the turning point to where you are now, is this your own personal experience of going through burnout and running from profession to take this on?
That's a great question and really valid, because I dealt with burnout at various stages in my career and for different points at each time. But it's not actually why I made this transition to coaching. That actually came at a point where my job was cut and I was on maternity leave. My husband and I were deciding what my return to work might look like. And it was more of a financial decision of, your teaching salary barely covers childcare. Is it really worth it? And at that point, it didn't align with the values, for the time I'd be spending away. But I definitely I had too much to give that I want to continue in. And so this is my way to continue to be in education and serve and support our teachers. Yeah, I wasn't ready to leave teaching, but I have experienced burnout. And very cyclically, throughout the year, I would experience this. But at one point, I started to experience physical symptoms of burnout. And different people experience it different ways, but it can feel, you're catching every virus that comes along. Some experience it as migraine headaches. Others might experience it as, like gastrointestinal upset. For me, I had unexplained weight loss, and I didn't have enough to lose anyway, but it was not explained by any medical test. They were checking me for everything. And it wasn't until I realized that it was because of my physical burnout and stress that was causing it that I was like, this is a big problem. This is scary. People are starting to ask if I'm sick. That I really had to make a change and really work to overcome burnout. So it wasn't a cycle. It wasn't taking a toll on my physical health. That actually too coincided with meeting my husband and noticing that there needed to be a shift in my core values. And that all kind of came to a head, which was really a blessing. Because it made me slow down and made me say, like, oh, I can physically see the signs of this. This is scary. I need to take some time to really work on my health and my mental health and the burnout. But that major life change, meeting my husband, getting married, forced me to look at my core values again, which is very helpful, to look at those perfectionist tendencies as I was trying to set healthy boundaries and trying to figure out what that looked like and what I was okay with. And I really muddled through on my own for a while, which led me to designing this signature program so that it's much easier for teachers. It's difficult to do on your own, but it's nice to have a very simple step-by-step guide and accountability so you really know what you should be looking at and how you can make those changes.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. One of my big wake up calls for me was a few years ago. I was teaching, and it had nothing to do with what was going on in my teaching role. I loved what I was doing, but I was pulled in so many directions outside of the teaching world that one day I woke up and it was 10:30 in the morning and I had 50 missed calls from my principal saying, "Where are you?"
Oh no.
Right? And so my reaction to telling me I burnt out was my body chose to not wake up.
Yeah.
Right. And next thing I knew, and from that day on, I started looking after myself a lot more. I started to care more about, what I really need to establish some non-negotiables and say no to things, because my time and my energy are being spent in so many other places that my body is saying, you need to shut down for a bit.
Yes.
Right. And so it's huge. Speaking to what we're both speaking about right now, this brings about the idea of change, which is the water element, and it's bringing in that fluid transition to taking action. So, Andrea, how do you help overwhelmed teachers make practical changes in their daily routines and mindset to reduce stress and promote wellness?
Yeah, that's a great question, because as overwhelmed, burned out teachers, don't give us one more thing to do. Don't tell me to change. I am surviving. And we tell ourselves the lie that this is working for me right now. Don't mess with it. When it's clearly not. But it just seems like too much to make any sort of change, because we're at the end of our fuse, And so I think it's really important to recognize and validate the overwhelm and where it's coming from. Like, I really appreciate what you shared. It wasn't necessarily even at school. As teachers, a lot of times it does come from maybe our work environment, but I think sometimes even we forget that we do have a life outside of school. I had a teacher say, I'm really overwhelmed because I'm the caregiver for an aging parent. that's really hard. Or like my own teenager is struggling with their mental health issues, and that's really difficult for me, you know? So there's a lot of things outside of the school environment too that causes burnout. So just validating it and being like, it's understandable why you're in this place, and it's not wrong. It is okay, but it doesn't have to stay this way. And then it's really, I find it most important and most impactful on an individual basis for them to figure out like, what is one small thing that you can do to reach the change that you want to make. Because we might say something like, I know I'm burned out because I'm not taking good care of my physical health and I'm not making time for it. So I'm eating poorly. I'm not doing healthy movement. I'm not staying hydrated. But that's a lot. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, you do want to look at your physical health overall goal, but what is one small change you can make this week? Just one. What feels doable? What feels realistic? And it might be something as small as I am committed to packing 2 healthy snacks a day instead of going to the vending machine. And on your, Sunday, you portion out your healthy snacks in your bag so you're not grabbing like the sweet treat or something that's making you feel really gross and bogged down by the end of the day. It might be something as simple as I'm going to be intentional about drinking water, because going to the bathroom is a necessity, not a privilege. And as teachers, we treat it as such a privilege. Yes. So like, okay, so we can brainstorm like, well, this teacher can give you a bathroom break at this time, those types of things. But starting small and setting something realistic, because we're not going to hit this overarching goal overnight, but we want to. And then again, it's perfectionism. We don't reach it. We just stop trying. Another important part of that is habit stacking. And I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar with habit stacking, but it's basically taking a new habit and pairing it with something that you already do. So for example, during your prep period, if you are already going to make copies in the copy room, maybe stack a new habit onto that. While your copies are copying, who knows what the workroom situation is, but if you want more healthy movement, you're in the copy room, maybe you're doing squats or something, get your blood flowing, or maybe it's like, okay, I need more relaxation in my day and it's hard to get in the copy room. How can you habit stack? Put in your headphones, listen to something calming, like that is your time. And that kind of creates a little physical boundary too, or yourself, you will stop and chat with 3 teachers down the hall during your break, so just finding a habit that you already have developed and then stacking something that you want to change with it. It just is a good reminder.
So the day that this episode comes out, I can already picture it. We're going to have teachers doing their squats in their copy rooms and everyone's going to be wondering what the heck's going on. Alchemist, you have permission to say, Andrea Perry told me that I can do squats in here. So don't judge me while I'm here doing it. And with that though, those are some simple strategies that people can just take to make small incremental changes that over time, like we said, they stack up almost like your habit stacking and to make a bigger impact.
Yes.
And with that, this brings about the need to make these decisions. You have to consciously and intentionally decide to do these things.
Yes.
And they're not risks. These are just decisions at this point. So what advice do you give teachers who are hesitant to take those necessary steps to make decisions and prioritize their own well-being?
Yeah. Well, I think again, it goes back to, we tell ourselves the lie that it's working for us as it is. So is it riskier to try something different, or is it riskier to stay at the status quo that you're doing right now and just survival? And I put it that way, I think it might feel a little less risky to make a change. But also, I'm a big advocate of testing things out in small bits. The whole idea I mentioned earlier of like, well, test out leaving an hour early. Does the world fall apart? Test out maybe not taking work home 2 evenings a week. Are you really that behind? Or are you planning more strategically to not create as much work? Because what feels really risky and scary is the unknown. But if we test something small out, and not saying this is a big change I'm making forever, but just test something out and be like, oh, that was safe. That actually felt okay. Like desensitizes us to what feels like a big risk. And during these times, we're filling ourselves. We're feeling better. We might feel more relaxed. We have more unplugged time from work, the classroom, thinking about it, because hopefully we'll fill that time with something positive. So that will help encourage, I think, that
Yeah, slowly
staying.
slowly expand your comfort level, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
next thing you know, your comfort level is a lot bigger. Now,
Yes.
coming back to that idea of perfectionism,
Mm-hmm.
how do you encourage teachers to take the risk of letting go of perfectionism in favor of, maybe something more balanced and joyful?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this one has been such an area of growth for me because I am just, it's in my bones to be a perfectionist. And I have such a hard time letting go of that because I very much believe like I am capable of reaching these high pinnacles of perfection. And it's just so silly to say it out loud, but really breaking down that mindset block, like I said, with your other podcast guest, you're human. Humans make mistakes. Sometimes it helps for us to say that out loud, like, I am human. It is okay that I make mistakes. It is expected that I make mistakes. That is okay. Just like we would tell our students, and it's not about the mistake you made, it's how you grow from that mistake and put our value there. So I think that's big. And then also really just again deciding what is going to be realistically achievable where you can feel like this was a job well done. Not perfect, but this is a job well done. So we're still holding ourselves to a high professional standard, but not an unrealistic standard. And in other areas of our life too, right? I've done this amount of exercise. I've, chosen these healthy meal choices, or I have committed and I have kept this time for my social well-being or my spiritual well-being. And that is enough. It doesn't have to be like everyone
Yep.
else's.
And it's important to know that, if you're in a school setting, particularly, your employer does not have a non-negotiable of what time you leave. And it's, oh, Andrea left at 4:59. We're letting her go tomorrow. That's not the case in a school division, right? I mean, if you leave when the kids are there, that might be a case, right?
Sure.
That's their non-negotiable is you're there. But if you're staying 2-3 hours after you're supposed to, leaving that hour early, no one above you is going to care.
Yes.
They're probably going to say, good for you for looking after yourself. Get out of here. I tell people all the time in my building, go home.
Good.
Go home.
That is wonderful.
Yes. And
I have actually had someone tell me the
yes.
opposite. Like, you're not here when everyone else is in the morning, but I'm coming at my contracted time. They're like, oh, I looked for you 2 hours after school. You weren't here. That was,
It's horrible.
And I'm just sitting here going, well, my contract says I'm.
Yeah, we don't all work for Elon Musk and X and all those places. I don't slam him because he's done a lot of really great things, and I talk about him in my book coming out, specifically his SpaceX. But they do sometimes set those expectations, like you hear the stories about you're expected to work this many hours, do this many things, only do this and only do that, right? And in the setting of education, it's just not true, and that goes for your lessons. You're going to have lessons that suck, and again, your principal is not going to come down the hall and say, give me your keys. Right. They're going to say, well, what do you need? What did you learn from it? What can we do to support you? And how can we try it again? Right? Because that's the beauty of what you're doing. In educating kids, you educate yourself too in what works best for them.
Yes.
And it's recognizing that. We're at 45 minutes in here, Andrea. I have to ask, if we were to take this conversation, take what you stand for, what are you hoping people action in their lives tomorrow from your message?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's kind of overwhelming sometimes to know like where to actually start. And I would really like to just direct people back to that resource that I'm going to be sharing with you all, hopefully in the show notes as well, that just starts you at your core values. It kind of just gives you an inventory. Where am I at right now? What are my core values? Is this where my burnout is coming from? Is something in misalignment? And we can't really make a map if we don't know where we're going. So it's just a really good first step that will take, a few minutes, and depending on how much time you want to look at it, but it'll help you really figure out just where you're at right now, how things might be misaligned, and then from there, action steps can be made to how to bring your life more in alignment. Yeah, I think that would be the big one.
Absolutely. Alchemist, this will be linked in the description. And this is a great time to actually talk about my Earth workshop that's out there, or my Earth micro course. So this is all about finding your values as well. And this is a special offer to anybody listening. Right now, it's a $100 course, 50% off for $50. If you listen to this episode and email me and saying, hey, I listened to Andrea Perry's episode. You just talked about this. I'd love that discount. I'll give you another $25 off. So now it only costs you $25 to take a micro course on finding your core values. You get a 30-minute guided presentation from me along with 10 downloadable PDFs on how to discover and implement and operationalize your core values. Leverage us, leverage the work of Andrea, leverage my work, discover who you are and where you need to go with it.
It's amazing.
Now, Andrea, I do have to ask, what does your future look like?
Yeah, my future looks interesting right now because when this episode airs, we'll be adjusting to life as a family of 4. We've got our...
There we go. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We have our baby arriving in December, so
Wow.
life is going to look a little bit different at that point. But I'm still continuing to serve teachers here from my home office and just, again, during this season of life, growing our family. This is what I'm able to contribute to the world of education. And I'm so excited to continue educating, supporting our teachers during this time. I stay home with my little ones for now. Who knows what else the future
That's
holds after
incredible.
that.
Yeah. I feel like this is the year of babies. Everyone I'm talking to is having one, and it's September 4th at the date that we're recording this. And we have our second one to become a family of 4 coming on September 10th here. And so small world, life's crazy. Yeah. Second girl coming. And at the time people are listening to this, second girl is now alive, and I'm heavily outnumbered 3-1. That being said,
My husband is the same
it is
way.
that world, right? Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
And our dog
But
is a girl.
Great to hear. Yeah. Oh, well, then, okay, there you go. So, yeah.
Congratulations.
That does it. Yeah, thank you. But I love to hear, regardless of where you're going, the passion stays with wanting to support people,
Yes.
to help them find joy in the things that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And with that is a very powerful message. So how can our listeners get in touch with you to discover more and unpack this?
Definitely. There's a couple ways that you can all contact me. You are definitely welcome to visit my website. It's www.thrivewithandreaperry.com. And I know there's going to be a link to that as well. And through that website, you can send me an email, or you can email me directly. It's my first name, Andrea, at thrivewithandreaperry.com. You can also use the website to schedule a free consultation. I love chatting with teachers and just seeing where you're at and seeing if it could be a good fit to support you through this. So lots of ways. Hope I get to talk to many of you.
I love that. Alchemists, whether you're in the realm of education, realm of leadership, or just listening for fun, hopefully you've learned that there are ways to bring joy into everything that you do and discover why you do things. Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the Elemental Educator Podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Elemental Educator. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator.